So in the last episode, we spent quite a long time getting this winding machine built, and it all went fairly well. It worked, but there was a major issue in so much as the motor that I put on just wasn't fast enough for what we needed. It turns out I'd bought a motor that was geared down to around about 60 revolutions per minute, which was way too slow, and would have meant that to wind a pickup you've effectively got over 3 hours of winding time, which is just not viable. So I'll swap that motor out now for one that will turn at about 600 RPM, so that's kind of 10 times as fast, so much more appropriate. I've done a little bit of tweaking to the actual mechanism, and I've kind of aligned it as best I can, and it's not bad. There is a little bit of movement there, but it's not excessive, and I think it will work just fine. And to be honest, I think scatterwound pickups have had their time. It is now the age of wobble wound, and I am leading the field in that regard, I think. So I'm not at all concerned about that. I've done a few little test runs. I've kind of attached the bobbin to here and wound on a few hundred winds, and it took a little bit of figuring out. It took a little bit of tweaking to get it to work, and I've got a bin that's kind of got quite a lot of red wire in it, but we did get there in the end. We got it to the point where it winds on kind of uniformly and reliably. I've got my kind of limit stops set up something like, so when we actually fit this on and get it winding, we should be okay. All in all, this has been a lot of work. It's not cost that much. Even with the additional motor, it's kind of just a little bit over £50. So I'm not worried about the cost. Is it cost effective to wind your own pickups? Probably not, I'd say. You can buy decent pickups for around about £30 to £40 each, and they'll be more than adequate for what you need. Buying the kits, buying all the materials, I don't think you're going to come in much under that. Plus you've got all the kind of time taken to wind the pickups, but I don't think it's really about money. It's about being able to say, I've done it, and this is something I've always wanted to do, and hopefully by the end of this video I'll be able to say I've done it. Right, let's get cracked on. And to build this pickup, I've bought myself a little bit of a kit. I've got it from a company here in the UK called Axes R Us. It wasn't a particularly expensive kit, and as you can see, it's got the chrome cover on, which is unusual for me, and this is perhaps the kind of thing you would have seen on an Epiphone Casino. Interesting. But also in the kit, we've got like a brass base plate. We've got some magnets and a bar for all the pole pieces to screw into. A bunch of screws of various types, some pole piece screws and some others. I think there's actually way more screws than I need there. And then the actual bobbin itself. Additional to that, I've got some braided hookup wire to actually create the connection to the guitar with. And then we have the all-important wire that we're actually going to wind onto the pickup, and this is 42 gauge or 0.06 of a millimeter. So it's kind of about the thickness of a human hair, so very thin. I bought this off Amazon. It's just some relatively cheap stuff. This first pickup is just going to be a proof of concept. It'll be interesting to see what it sounds like, but I just want to prove myself that I can actually do this. In terms of the bobbin, it is quite important that there's no kind of sharp edges or anything on there, and it feels okay actually. It doesn't feel too bad at all, but there are some little casting marks on there, and I don't want anything that's going to kind of snag the wire as we're winding this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some kind of fairly fine sandpaper. This is 600 grit, and I'm just going to kind of give all those edges a really nice sand up and make sure that they're as smooth as they can be. Okay, so that's the bobbin all prepared, but I'm going to need a fairly substantial connection between this winding wire and the hookup wire that we're actually going to connect into the guitar. If we were just relying on this really fine wire, the chances are that handling it will break it and we will end up having to rewind the pickup. So I'm going to attach the winding wire to this kind of more substantial wire, and we'll pass that through into the bobbin and start our wind from there, which will leave us a much more substantial bit of wire to actually do the work with later on down the line when we need it. So I'm very quickly going to set this up. We'll just solder the winding wire onto here and then feed it into the bobbin. And this is very fiddly work. Even finding the end of the bloody wire is a bit of a nightmare. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap that around a few times just to hold it in place, and just drop a little bit of solder on there. Just to hold everything together. I'm just going to kind of poke that into place as best I can. And then I've just got some kind of quite thin tape. I'm just going to lay a bit of that down over that just to A, hold it in place, but B, also just cover over that joint that I've just made, just so that it doesn't cause a problem with the winding down the line. And with that done, I think we're pretty much ready to start and see if we can get this wound. And now I'm just going to stick this on to the actual winder, a bit of super glue, masking tape. Now I've got this running kind of in the same direction or in line with the magnet that operates the reed switch. Now a few people have said that that's going to throw the whole thing out of balance, having that magnet on this little rotating platen. The truth of the matter is it's a very small magnet that doesn't really weigh much, and also the material to house it was removed from the component, so that's been reduced. So I don't think there's actually that much difference, and I think with the bobbin and the wire kind of in line with it, that's going to increase the rotating mass, which should effectively reduce the differential caused by the magnet. That's what I'm saying anyway. We'll see if it actually works or not. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. I've got the spool of wire just on the floor in a little plastic tub. I found that that's probably the best way to do it. Tried various methods of having like a little holder set up, and it just put too much tension on the wire, so we've just got that down there. I think my stops are kind of set up pretty much where we need them. So I'll start just very slowly adding a few winds on, just as much as anything to check that my stops are in the right place. You actually need to come over a little bit with this one. It looks okay, so I'm going to slowly increase the speed. Okay, been going at this for a few minutes now and I'm up to 1,000 wines, so we're about 10% of the way there and it all looks to be going very well so far. And you can see there we're getting that wound on quite nicely. So I'm going to crack on. I've been going quite slowly because I just want to make sure I can get this to work, but it seems to be going fine, so I'm going to try and crank the speed up just a little bit for this next section. Okay, so as you can see there, we're up to just under 4,500 wines and everything still seems to be going absolutely fine. So I'm going to crack on, see if we can get this done. Okay, I've made a bit of a boo-boo, but thankfully it's not pickup related, it's filming related. I've done the next couple of bits and forgot to press the record button like an idiot. But all I've done basically is I've added this second wire onto the other end of the coil and I've just wrapped everything in a little bit of black tape just to keep it nice and secure and hopefully prevent any damage. And I've given it a quick check with the multimeter, and at the number of wines I gave it, it's come out at 8.2k, which is pretty much exactly what I wanted it to be. So I'm very happy with that. you might have noticed that I went a little bit over the 10,000 wines. I actually went to 10,300. I'd seen references that 10,000 wines would give me about 8k. I wanted it slightly hotter than that, so that's what I've ended up with. So that's all good. Happy with the way that that's come out, and I'm really, really pleased that I've actually managed to wine this in the first place. I wasn't utterly convinced, I have to say. So next up is I need to get the pole pieces installed, and for that I'm going to need this little doohickey here and the 6 little pole piece screws as well. And these actually are quite tight to the bobbin. Screw those in. I'm going to leave them a little bit proud as well for the time being, just until we kind of get a little bit further down the line with it. Oh, well, I thought that was screwing into there, but actually it's not, it just sits there. So we can leave that bit off for a little while. So next up, we need to start working on the base plate and to get this all ready to put together. So I think I'm going to get the winder out of the way because we don't need that anymore. And it'll just give me a little bit more room on the bench. And to start this, I'm just going to cut a really long length of that. That's way more than I need, I would imagine. And just kind of cut through this outer braiding a little bit. Before I do anything else, I'll just bring the blue octopus in. We'll just tin that. And we can run that through there. I'm just going to create a little blob of solder on the base plate. I've got my soldering iron turned up quite high because you do need to get quite a lot of heat to get anything to stick to something as big and solid as this base plate. And then I'm going to just try and get that soldered into there. It seems adhered well enough. Just solder that one together. Put a bit of heat shrink on there and we should be ready for assembly. So next up we need to install this little metal plate and the 2 magnets, and I'm going to install these so that the north edge of the magnet is against that metal plate for both of them. So I've got a little compass, and so that's the north edge of that one. Put that in there. And that is the north edge of this one. So we could put that in there, and then we can go about putting this all together. And then it's just a case of screwing in these 2 little screws on the bottom to kind of pull it all together. And there we have p90 pickup. Just slide that cover across for effect. I think that's all looking very, very good. So the next thing we need to do is to test this out. Now, I haven't got time in this video to swap this into a guitar. and give you a sound demonstration. I will be doing that in a short video, probably on Saturday, but we can still do kind of the tap test. So I'm going to get this temporarily attached to the shop amp and we'll see if we've got any output. Okay, so that's all plugged in, and there is a little bit of hum. I thought it was a lot worse to start with, but I've done my usual trick of leaving the soldering iron plugged on, which always makes it sound worse, as you can hear there. But turn that off, and that's not actually that bad. But if we give them a tap, we are definitely getting some output from the pickup. So that's absolutely brilliant. Very, very happy with that. I wasn't utterly convinced that I'd be able to pull this one off, but we seem to have done so successfully. And as my good friend Jimmy DeResta always says, you go to school on the first one, and this has definitely been a learning experience. But at this stage of the game, I'm just absolutely elated to have produced a working pickup. So next up is I'm going to get one of my P90 equipped Les Paul Juniors down here over the next day or so, whip the pickup that's in there out, replace it with this one, and just see that it actually works in the context of a guitar. But as I say, I haven't really got time to do that in this episode, so I'm going to leave that till probably a short Saturday video, so keep your eyes out for that. Until then, as always, don't forget to hit the like button if you've enjoyed this. I've noticed that the last video on the pickup winder got quite a lot of new viewers. If you are one of those new viewers and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. It really does help the channel a lot. I'll be back with that demonstration video very soon. So until then, thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.